Hello, hello, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the GCSE History options presentation. It's lovely to see lots of people attending already. So we've got nearly 30 attendees. Just give it a moment or two just to allow any people to join. So we're going to talk a little bit tonight about a subject that's obviously a passion of mine, and I hope will be a passion of yours. That's history. We do a brilliantly diverse history GCSE, taught generally by myself and Mr. Herbert. I'm Mr. Bidmead, by the way, for parents who don't know me, and sometimes we're assisted by Miss Houghton at GCSE as well. So just we're watching a few more people come in. I will just begin the presentation, and if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask as you go along, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. And I'll come to those questions at the end if there are any. So first thing that obviously we want to do is talk about why we might choose GCSE history. And there are lots of reasons, so many reasons in fact. Looking at just the joy of the subject, the thing I hope attracts you most to it, is studying will give you answers to questions, not just questions about the past, but questions that are still relevant to us today as people and educated citizens of the world. So when we look at something like the challenges faced by a monarch such as Elizabeth I, it really throws into light some of the things that are really important for the world today. What challenges did women face in the past? What different sort of issues did a female monarch face in the 16th century? And what kind of light can that throw on the ongoing challenges facing women in the 21st century? When we look at our topic, health and the people, and I'll talk about that a bit more later, it really shows us how we've got to where we are today, about what public health decisions have been made, why we make those, why we're able to respond so quickly to a pandemic today, and why we've been so effective in developing vaccines so quickly. But it also helps us reflect on issues like what was it like to live under a dictatorship? What was it like to live in a country like Nazi Germany? And as we know across the globe, so many people are living in challenging situations where their human rights, their civil rights are being taken away from them. Whether we're looking at Afghanistan, whether we're looking at Burma, whether we're looking at countries in the Middle East, it's so important to us to be able to understand and empathise where these sort of issues have arisen from, how they've been dealt with in the past, and what we can learn from history to understand how we've got to today. Beyond the joy of the subject, there are lots of skills that you'll learn along the way. Those skills are extremely useful for supporting you in other GCSE subjects. Those skills are extremely useful for a range of A-levels, not just the A-levels of history, but other A-levels that you'll be considering too. And university and future job opportunities as well will open up to you as a result of studying history. So perhaps the most obvious skill that one develops as a historian is the ability to communicate both orally and in writing an argument. To put forward a point, whether that is trying to persuade somebody of a medical treatment that they should pursue if you're a doctor, whether that's putting forward a business case to a company or to an employer about why they should invest or why they should promote you, whether it's simply talking with friends about ideas that you have about the way the world should be. Historians have the real skill of using evidence to support a point, and therefore to be able to change minds, change lives, and change societies in the world. Beyond that, we do a lot of independent research, certainly a lot more at GCSE and later at A-level than you will have done in Key Stage 3. You'll be given more independence to find out your examples, more independence to make decisions about how you learn, about how you put together your work, and an expectation that you will show an interest and go into greater depth about some of the topics that we're studying. Within that, you'll come across a lot of problem-solving skills. So when we look at sources of information from the past, sometimes their meaning is not absolutely clear to us, and we have to sort of deconstruct their meaning. We have to look for clues. We have to apply certain methods to sources from the past in order to understand what they might mean to people from the past. We have to be able to empathise a lot with their sort of understanding of the world as it was then. And building on to our kind of ideas of constructing an argument, we have to be very analytical. We have to be able to understand the story, really interesting, really important, but also be able to explain how those informations, how they've been interpreted, and how we as historians can interpret them. So a huge number of skills that are hugely translatable to roles in from management consultancy through to veterinary medicine. The kind of skills that you'll develop as a historian will be vital for persuading people of your opinions, your ideas, and what you know to be right based on evidence. So, again, we hope you take the subject for a love of the subject, but also studying history leads you onto all sorts of different career paths. Some of the most obvious ones are perhaps journalism. Some of the most obvious ones are perhaps things like law or business, finance, politics, marketing, where you're obviously being able to take an idea and present that idea to people in a persuasive way. I was just teaching, or archaeology being very specific. But we've had people who've gone on doing A-level history, for example, to be very successful in medicine, and in a whole range of careers, particularly because of the skills that they've developed while studying the degree, the GCSE. So in terms of going on to what you might study, we do the new AQA history specification, the 1 to 9. It's not an IGCSE, you'll get a numbered grade, and we do 2 topics in that. So the first topic that we'll do is something called Understanding the Modern World, which has got 2 parts to it. So you'll be studying mainly modern history in this part, Nazi Germany, and conflict and tension, looking at the interwar years between the First and the Second World Wars. And the second assessment is something called Shaping the Nation. It's focused on British history particularly, a focus on a very long sort of breadth of history, 1,000 years of health from the Middle Ages right up to the present day. And also a depth study on Elizabethan England, looking at Tudor England and why this was such a golden age for the period. We do 2 exams. There's no coursework, it's 100% examined. Each one's 50% and consists of a range of short answer questions and longer type essay type questions. So contrary to some of the myths that you sometimes hear, history isn't all about just writing long essays. There are a number of shorter kind of answer questions with sort of 4, 6, 8 marks in it as well. So looking a little bit more about the kinds of things you might study, this will be familiar to Year 9. We do peacemaking as our first thing. We look at the Treaty of Versailles. You've spent literally sort of 1 lesson on it. We'll look at it in a lot more detail. We'll also look at the thing that followed the peace treaties, the League of Nations, a forerunner to our modern United Nations, which has done such a lot of work to try and prevent conflicts around the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Central Asia, and why that failed, why that organisation was unable to prevent the Second World War following the First World War. And those of you who were in the talks today, looking at failure as the key, the infinite key to intelligence, will know what I'm talking about here, when we can see why the United Nations has been more successful based on the failures of the League of Nations. And then we'll look at, having the League failed, why World War II broke out, the role of Hitler, the role of Stalin, the role of Mussolini, Chamberlain. There's a very good Netflix film out at the moment on appeasement as well, which some of you might watch. And so we've got this really kind of interesting topic. We do a lot of contemporary source material, we look at a lot of cartoons, we try and analyse them and develop some really important skills there. So we look at then, with the Germany topic, we go into a lot of depth here too, more detail. We look at Germany before World War I, the growth of democracy. We look at how Germany was changed by the First World War. We look at Germany's experience after the Great Depression, the rise of Hitler, something Year 9 are familiar with at the moment, and particularly what it was like to live under the Nazis for groups such as women, children, and of course minorities. And looking at terrible events such as the Holocaust and World War II. Again, in that, we look at a range of sources and we look at a range of essay questions. Once we've done that topic, we begin to have a look at our British history topics. One that's very pertinent, has never been more pertinent than today during the pandemic we're all facing. We look a little bit about the history of medicine. So we look all the way back to the Middle Ages, to 1000 AD, and we look at their beliefs about the causes of disease, about their beliefs in God and superstition, going very much back to some of the material some of you remember covering with your Black Death boxes in Year 7. We look at how surgery, how primitive and basic and dangerous surgery was, the role of governments, very limited in changing attitudes towards health. We then move through into the Renaissance, we see the beginnings of change, and then into the 19th century, where we develop modern anaesthetics, modern antiseptics for effective surgery. We develop an understanding of germs, understand the real causes of disease, and governments start taking responsibility for building sewers and providing compulsory vaccinations for people to deal with diseases like smallpox. And then we finish that long journey going right up to the present day, including coronavirus and our responses to it, looking at the impacts of wars such as the First World War, Second World War, the foundation of the NHS, and the new discoveries such as DNA and what they might mean for the future. So a real breadth of history covered in that topic. And then our final topic is Elizabethan England, and we look at, as I say, the challenges of Elizabeth as a ruler, her styles of government, systems of government, very much top down, looking at kind of the big political decisions. But then we also look bottom up at life in Elizabethan times, what it was like to be poor, what it was like to be an explorer on an Elizabethan ship discovering the new world, what it was like, the architecture of places some of you might have visited, National Trust properties such as Hardwick Hall or the Globe in London. Look at war with Spain, the Spanish Armada, reasons for its defeat, things you're broadly familiar with from Year 8 history. And then there's a study of a particular historic environment as well, which A2A will tell us a little bit more about when we get nearer to your GCSEs. So they're all the topics we cover, and I think this is a good time to take one of the questions that's come in, which is what's the percentage split of marks between short questions and essay questions in the exam? So each of those 4 units we've just talked about has one essay question, which comes at the end of the paper and is worth either 12 or 16 marks. So that's the kind of the long kind of essay response, which asks you, a given factor and asks you whether it was the most important factor compared to other things. And you have to write a range of paragraphs and consider how each one contributed and which one was perhaps the most important. So that's worth 16 marks on each paper, or 12 marks on one of the papers. Compared to that, you've got short answer questions which make up the rest. So on the Elizabethan paper, for example, you've got 3 shorter questions, one looking at some source work, 2 asking you to make sort of shorter answers, 8 marks, sort of quite standard, not making necessarily a judgment, but just exploring a range of ideas, and they're 8 marks each. So on the Elizabeth paper, it would be 8, 16, 24 marks for the shorter answer questions, and then 16 marks. I think my maths may have failed me. I think that's a 60-40 split, 60% the shorter ones and 40% the longer ones. But someone has to check my maths there. On the Nazi Germany paper, the split's much more towards shorter answer questions. So there are 2 4-mark questions, very sort of short answers, 1 8-mark question, another 8-mark question, and then a 12-mark question, a sort of a shorter essay where they'll just give you 2 factors. So every question has an essay, every paper has an essay on it, but they're balanced out with a range of shorter questions. One might be, for example, just describe 2 features of the unemployed in Germany, and you might write something like the unemployed in Germany were predominantly from the working class. They experienced great poverty with hardships in accessing food and fuel in the period. So sort of quite simplistic answers, but requiring a knowledge of the period. So I hope that's answered that question. Just coming to the end of our presentation, and there's a big maybe around these. Of course, so many things have changed, but we're very much hoping that perhaps by autumn 2023, your daughters may be well in a position in more than 18 months for us to take them off island. We've run very many successful trips in the past, which we hope to reinstate. The first one, the least ambitious of the 2, which we'd be hopefully confident of making run, is a trip to London, which we've run very successfully numerous times in the past, supporting health and the people aspects of the course, visiting the Hunterian Museum, doing some hands-on workshops around anatomy and surgery in the past, visiting the multi-million-pound newly refurnished Wellcome Museum at the top of the Science Museum, and also going to the old operating theatre in London as well to experience a surgery from the early 19th century, as well as taking in some revision lecture series provided by external partners in London. Slightly more ambitiously, possibly for 2023, but certainly something we would be looking to actively pursue for your daughters. And students currently in Year 9 would be a visit to Auschwitz in Poland. Again, this is something we've run very successfully in the past. Visiting Oscar Schindler's factory. Some of you may have seen Schindler's List, certain parents may have done. The main focus of that being a visit to Auschwitz extermination camp to see for ourselves firsthand and experience the horrors of that period. And then a time in Krakow as well, looking at a little bit of the history of the ghetto there. Once we've done that, it's just a little sort of run through for our results. As you can see, last year we were looking at centre assessed grades, CAG grades. These were, of course, very high. Our ability to support our students, to show evidence of high level success outside of strict exam conditions was very successful. You can see we achieved nearly 40% grade 9, over 90% grade 7 to 9, and of course 100% grade 5 to 9. Going back a year to previous CAGs, you'll be able to see again we were very successful in supporting our students. But given the likelihood that you and your daughters will sit sort of real external exams in a couple of years, probably the most important one to you is the 2019 results, our last set of sort of real results under exam conditions. And you can see that history has always had one of the most successful exam pass rates in the school. We've had traditionally sort of somewhere between 20 and 30%. In 2019 it was about 26%. Grade 9, so 1 in every 4 students who sat GCSE history achieved a grade 9. As you can see, it's almost 75% grade 7 to 9, the vast majority of our students achieving a grade 7. We're very proud to be achieving 100% grade 5 and above in history. We take a very diverse cohort and we're able to support all of them to achieve their potential. So one of the questions I've had in as well is, if you wanted to do A-level history, is it necessary to also do GCSE history as well? And the answer there is no. We do, of course, encourage it. If you are passionate about history, it's great to have studied it in GCSE. We do develop a lot of skills along the way that are useful to A-level, but all we ask is that students have achieved at least grade 7 in English literature to be entered onto the GCSE, onto the A-level history course. So if you didn't want to take GCSE history and you did want to pick it up at A-level, that would be absolutely fine. Being completely honest, I actually did that myself. I studied geography at GCSE and then realised that my passion actually lay with history and took A-level. But I suppose if you're my sort of argument would be, from my own hindsight, is if you like history enough to study it at A-level, you know, I'd hope you perhaps consider it for GCSE as well. That's it in terms of the presentation. I think I've broadly stuck to the time as well, so people could be ready for their following subjects. If you've got any questions after this, please do drop them in the Q&A. I'll stay on for a couple of minutes to see if any appear. But you can also email me directly, or you can, of course, ask your teachers, students or parents can email them if you've got any questions about the GCSE. So thank you very much for attending tonight. Lovely to see so many people joining, and we will see your daughters over the coming weeks. Thank you very much. And as I haven't had any questions coming in yet in the last few minutes, I will say good night to you all and thank you very much for your time. And as I say, you can always email if you do come up with any questions after the event.